We are ready to go. Good morning. Hey, this is Shaun with the Atlanta Tennis Podcast, powered by Go Tennis. Check out our calendar of Metro Atlanta tennis events at letsgotennis.com. And we want to hear your story on the podcast right now. We want to hear it. If it's interesting, if it's something fun, something crazy happened on a tennis court, go to letsgotennis.com/my story and tell us your story. But today, more importantly, right now, be in the moment, Justin Yeo. Right now is 10 minutes of tennis. We are talking to world renowned tennis coach, Australian in Puerto Rico, Justin Yeo. And today's topic is called, the topic isn't called, the episode is called, but today is the topic: broad vision versus narrow vision. Use it, learn how to use it to play like a pro and play with less errors. So, Justin Yeo, help me out here. Which one am I using to play like a pro? Broad vision or narrow vision, or do I need both?
You need both. You
Okay.
need both all the time. All right. So narrow vision is just to focus on the ball. Really try to really see the ball when you're making contact. To see the ball when it's at contact, which we all know we don't see because it goes so fast. But at least narrow the vision down so that your head stays on contact. The broad vision is to be able to see what's in the background so that you can make a decision without having to look up and see your target before you hit the ball. And I just worked with a group of 2-5 ladies, and we worked on literally just knowing how to hit, focus on just striking the ball, but see the singles line cross court while hitting the tennis ball. And every one of them started hitting 4 to 5 balls cross court directly and effectively because they learned how to visualize their target while striking the ball versus looking up off the ball. So that's pretty much broad vision, narrow vision.
So my broad vision is sometimes, is it peripheral or is it conceptual?
Peripheral.
Meaning I'm
Absolutely
watching the
peripheral.
ball, but I'm also aware of the things in my periphery, and maybe that thing in my periphery is my target at the same time.
100%, 100%. And if we don't talk about it when we're teaching, and people are trying to, they're just trying to strike the ball, they can't also sometimes even make a decision, which actually affects the way they strike the ball. It affects their preparation, it affects their footwork, it affects their execution, it affects all that purely because sometimes you can say, hey, what can you see in the background while watching the ball? And when they do that, they're like, okay, I can see that corner while striking the ball. Good. All right, let's hit that corner, but let's strike the ball at the same time. And if you start literally teaching them that, you'll be amazed how great they can actually play the court and strike the ball better because they're learning broad and narrow, broad and narrow. I mean, I'm only saying what the pros do naturally, right? I mean, the pros naturally, we're trying to pick a decision and we're visualizing our target while watching the ball.
Right, but I wouldn't call it you do it naturally. You do it naturally after thousands of years of practice. Like that's a thing that you've really worked hard. You didn't just pop out as a person and just naturally do something. They do it naturally
100%.
now after working on it a lot.
Yep. And then even to the point of if we go a little further, sometimes people can see the broad vision and see the narrow vision, but they didn't make a decision, right? So, they're like, oh, I've got this option, I got that option. Oh, I got tons of options. I just messed up because I didn't pick one,
We talk about players a lot that have so many options, maybe a Nick Kyrgios type or somebody who's a little less narrow, saying this is my thing, this is what I do. The players with lots of options. I was one of those players personally, so I like to hit the interesting shot. So I'm scrolling through all of my options before I hit every shot, trying to make a choice, right? So would you say having more options is sometimes a bad thing in this case?
Well, I think that brings up a whole nother subject, but I would say options. I would say options in your toolbox are very good. Options to choose from can be poor for the reason that you want to seem to select the things that hurt your opponent the most. And that's what I think sometimes people don't take. Like they're like, I've got all these tools, I've got this shot, I got that shot, but which one really is going to hurt my opponent the most.
And that's going to
And
be directly related to my broad vision, because if I can
correct,
see where
correct,
my opponent is or where they like to go, seeing
correct.
their patterns helps me narrow down not just my decision for this shot, but
Yep.
it might carve out some of the tools in my toolbox that I won't need today.
Yeah. Even broad vision can help. I mean, just perspective wise, it helps a player stop hitting back to their opponent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, because sometimes the last thing they see is the opponent because that's the biggest object, and they hit it right back to them because that's the last thing they looked at. So, you know, broad vision can really help you start to think about like, oh, there's the opening of the court. And then you have to work on your narrow, because if you don't, you're looking towards your target before you strike the ball. So, you know, that's pretty much what the subject's about: broad, narrow, and you're trying to work on both at the same time.
And each of these gives me about half a second to a full second to be able to use each one. If you and I are playing against each other, and I'm looking up at you because the ball's over there with you. Wait, where are you?
Yeah,
you're there. I'm looking at you to hit it over there. I'm seeing that broad vision, but as the ball gets closer, my vision needs to narrow, so then I can watch the ball hit the racket. And then look up broad again. So it's back and forth every shot.
Every shot, you're inside broad, narrow, the whole time. The whole time. But it's something at a lower level that if you teach, like a majority of people that tell me they're slow, the first thing I teach them is to look at the other player's racket. And if you start watching the racket, you start to split step a little earlier, and all of a sudden you're quicker than you were the day before. Just from looking at something differently. So same with broad and narrow. Sometimes people don't understand how to make tactical or better decisions because they're just not being taught or shown where you're really looking at. Can you see it in the background? You know, because if they don't, all they're doing was watching the ball and hitting the ball.
They just
you
see ball, hit ball.
Correct. And I mean, I hear it all the time. I can go across courts and they go, "Hey, watch the ball, racket to racket, racket to racket." I'm like, yeah, that's cool, but tactically you're screwed because you're just watching the ball going back and forth.
Good, right.
You know, so it is very important that earlier they start to learn. And it's, as I said to Lees, you're 2.5. I don't very rarely touch 2.5 ladies, but I did say there's no reason why I can't teach you some of this advanced tools, because it's something you can practice right from now. You're raw. So, and honestly, they rallied the ball cross court, almost alley to alley, purely for the reason that they learned what they're looking at.
Well, that was going to be one of my last questions that I was kind of saving, I guess, is what level is this? What level are we discussing? Because I would have thought this is a fairly high level concept, but you started our 10 minutes of tennis today saying you just got off the court with a bunch of 2.5 NTRP rated women playing. And so that's pretty much beginner. That's the beginning levels.
Right.
And this isn't just hey, I want you to consider this as a target. You actually worked on it. They were learning on that.
Yeah. I'll give Mike Burrell a bit of a chat out. Mike Burrell is a big one at putting targets out on the court.
Yeah.
Right. So that way for kids, you're giving a visual, and that way they can see the color in the background, but watch the ball at the same time. You know, so you can give them that, and you can teach them patterns on how to see the court more than see the person. There's a lot of different tricks you can do. I tend to not use too many aids because when they go out to play, they're not going to be there. So I try to say, hey, can you see the corner? Can you see two white lines? Right? We want to hit the area in front of those two white lines. I try to just give them areas, things that they're going to look for, right? Or you break down the court into 4 quadrants. You know, at a lower level, you say, okay, I want you to put it in number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4. But they're seeing the areas of the court versus the player. And then if they're missing the ball, it's like, okay, well, broad vision looked great. You looked like you knew where you were going, but you didn't watch the ball. So you lost your narrow vision, you see? And so you have to start working on all of those things. And from a lower level or junior level, as their eyes are developing into adults, that's a great thing to try to teach them those tools as they get older. All they'll see is the court. They won't see the player.
And being able to do both, setting out the target, because at the beginner junior level, we set out a lot of targets because It's the simple, like take the rest of it out, focus on hitting this one thing. But then when you put out a second target and you say, okay, now I want you to zoom out. I need you to see both so you can pick one and then take them away and say, can you still see them? Makes me think, and forgive me for the reference, it's not tennis, but it's chess. In one of my favorite movies about parenting is Searching for Bobby Fischer. And the chess coach takes all the pieces on the board and he shoves them off the board and he says, now look at the board. What do you see? Don't move until you see it. And it's being able to see what was there, knowing the target is there without actually having it there. Maybe that's a similar thing to take the target away and say, use your broad vision to remember where that target was.
Right. You can use the color codes to show them they can do it.
Yeah.
And give them the feeling of what it should feel like to broad, narrow. But then I would take the targets away and see if they can repeat it. Yeah. And then you want to throw them in point play so that under pressure the most, can they still have that, or do they freak out and just focus on narrow vision when they go to competition? So it is a concept of a build-up progression-wise, but it's not letting go of understanding what you see in the background versus what you see to hit the ball.
There you go. I like it. Justin Yeo, 10 minutes of tennis. Thanks, mate. I appreciate your time. We'll see you again next week. Thank you, sir.
Cheers, mate. Have a good one.